You have done this before. You set the alarm earlier than usual. You laid out your clothes the night before. You felt something real this time, not just a vague wish, but actual momentum. Day 1 went well. Day 3 felt good. By day 7, you were starting to believe it. And then, somewhere around day 18, day 20, maybe day 22, something shifted. Not dramatically. There was no single moment of failure. You just stopped. And a week later, you were back to exactly where you started, wondering what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. But something is wrong with the story you have been told about how habits work. The version most people believe goes something like this. If you push through the discomfort long enough, the behavior becomes automatic. It gets easier. Your mind stops resisting. And eventually the habit is just part of who you are. The problem is not that this is completely false. The problem is that it skips the most important part. The part that happens around week 3. The part your brain does quietly and deliberately. The part that has been ending your good habits since long before habit trackers existed. To understand what is actually happening, you need to go back about 40,000 years. Your ancestors lived in a world defined by one overwhelming pressure: energy scarcity. Calories were not something you could order or store indefinitely. They were something you hunted, something you gathered, something you might not find today, or tomorrow, or for several days in a row. In that environment, the body that survived was not the one that burned the most energy. It was the one that spent energy most carefully. That resisted unnecessary effort unless the reward was clear and immediate. Your brain inherited that body, every single piece of it. And your brain has a system whose entire job is to monitor how much energy you are spending and ask one relentless question: is this worth it? Neuroscientists call this the cost-benefit evaluation system, centered in a region called the anterior cingulate cortex. Every time you do something effortful, this system runs in the background, calculating. And here is the part that changes everything. The system is not static. It updates. In the first days of a new habit, the reward signal is high. Novelty itself is a reward. Your brain releases dopamine in response to new experiences, new versions of yourself that feel possible. The gym feels like discovery. The morning run feels like freedom. The effort is real, but so is the chemical payoff, and for a while the calculation tips in favor of continuing. But novelty fades. This is not a character flaw. This is a neurological fact. As a behavior becomes familiar, the dopamine response decreases. Your brain stops treating it as new information and starts filing it as known. The excitement flattens. And somewhere between days 14 and 21, the cost-benefit calculation shifts. The effort is still there. The discomfort is still there. But the chemical reward has dropped, and your ancient brain makes what it believes is the rational decision. Stop. Conserve. Find something easier. Phillippa Lally, a health psychology researcher at University College London, followed 96 people as they tried to build new habits over 12 weeks. The popular idea was that habits take 21 days to form. Her data told a different story. On average, it took 66 days for a behavior to become truly automatic. But the pattern that appeared most consistently was not a smooth curve from effort to ease. It was a dip. A window of increased resistance, usually in the 3rd week, when the novelty had worn off, but the automaticity had not yet arrived. That window is where almost every good habit dies. And it is not because you lack willpower. Willpower is a conscious override of an unconscious system, and unconscious systems almost always win because they do not get tired. They do not need motivation. They just run, quietly and constantly, underneath everything you think and decide and intend. Roy Baumeister at Florida State University demonstrated one of the most replicated findings in psychology. Conscious self-control is a limited resource. He called it ego depletion. Every decision, every act of resistance draws from the same finite pool. By week 3, that pool is low, exactly when your brain's ancient cost-benefit system is working hardest against you. That is not a coincidence. It is a collision. And there is something else happening that almost nobody talks about. When you begin a new habit, you begin a new self-concept. For the first 2 weeks, that identity is exciting and fragile and new. But somewhere in week 3, the newness has worn off, and the identity has not yet solidified. You are caught between who you were and who you are trying to become. Psychologists call this the identity gap. And in that gap, the old identity pulls hard. Your brain starts whispering that maybe this new version of you is not actually who you are. Maybe the old pattern was the real you. That whisper is not the truth, but it is very loud in week 3. James Clear identified something he called the plateau of latent potential. Habit formation does not produce visible results at a constant rate. For a long time, nothing seems to change. And then, past a certain threshold, everything shifts at once. The problem is that the period before the threshold feels identical to failure. You stop, usually just before the moment when everything was about to move. So what actually works? Wendy Wood, a behavioral scientist at the University of Southern California, found that the most durable habits are not built on willpower. They are embedded in context, tied to a specific place, a specific time, a trigger that fires without requiring a decision. When you have to decide whether to do the thing, you have already lost half the battle. The goal is to remove the decision entirely, to make the behavior the path of least resistance rather than a daily act of resistance. And the reward needs to come sooner. Your ancient brain cannot feel the future version of you. It can only feel the discomfort right now. Find what feels good immediately, not the outcome, but the process itself, and make that the thing you are showing up for. Because here is what your brain is not telling you in week 3, in that quiet window where everything feels like it is falling apart. The discomfort is not a sign the habit is wrong for you. It is a sign your nervous system is mid-negotiation. A very old negotiation between the world you evolved for and the life you are trying to build. The same brain fighting you right now learned to walk, learned to read, learned every skill you now do without thinking. It adapts. It eventually stops resisting what becomes familiar enough to feel safe. You just have to get it to familiar, and familiar is only on the other side of the window you keep stopping at.